Hmm. Hey everyone, welcome back to You Enjoy Life. I'm Joshua, and I wanted to share my basically I figured out this formula, the secret formula, but there's no payments or anything. I just want to give this out for free. Secret formula on how to write a book very quickly and write a good book. Because if you're someone that wants to write, there's probably a million reasons that you have why you can't write or why it's going to take so long. I was just talking to someone and I told her that I wrote a book recently from start to finish in 5 days, from start to publish, I should say, in 5 days. I self-published, and she was like, what? Like, usually writers take like 1 or 2 years. And yes, I understand why, and I'm not saying I'm some amazing, incredible writer, but I do love writing, and I've learned a lot about how to write and take your heart, take your stories, take your freaking life, put it on the pages, and get out what you want to get out. So, just a mini history. When I first got into school and everything, I dreaded writing. In high school, writing papers, reading books, both were just horrible. I did Spark Notes. It wasn't until college when I read my first book and just something shifted and changed, and I fell in love with reading, and I read all the Harry Potter series, but I still didn't like to write. I didn't understand it. I didn't have the inspiration for writing, and it was just, honestly, it was just a struggle. It was just like my brain would just turn to mush. But slowly, as I got more into reading, I started writing more. And originally, I was actually writing because I was in this band, and we were sending emails to each other. And all my bandmates were super smart and were using big words and doing all their stuff. And I just felt kind of stupid because I felt like I couldn't translate my writing in the emails to my ideas. So I was like, I need to learn how to write. That led me to writing a blog. And when I wrote my first book, it was completely unplanned. I always was taking notes and coming up with ideas. And one day I just started writing the story. And it was this like dystopian science fiction romance novel in the future. And it was just characters, and I just and within a few weeks I had the first draft done. And then I started learning about editing. I got hired an editor. I hired someone to design the artwork. I figured out how to publish it just online, like on Amazon. There's so many different ways to self-publish. I'm not going to talk too much about the publishing world. I will explain why I avoid the publishing world, although there are definitely benefits to that. Just for me personally, and the kind of writing that I do, and already having an audience, I just prefer to just go straight and direct. So there's a lot of tips that are good to know about writing a book, but the number one thing that I need to translate here is that you can spend your whole life trying to write the perfect book, or you can recognize that just getting something out there is a start. I know people that are super talented that spend 5-10 years trying to craft their poetry, their music, their whatever art they're releasing, and they never actually share it, typically because out of fear that it's not going to be good enough, that it needs to be perfect. And there's this idea of perfectionism, that people want to have. I just want to be perfect, I just want to get it right. And it's that idea of trying to get it right that actually blocks your creativity. So if you want to be a channel for writing, so this book I just wrote, this barefoot book, which, by the way, any of the books that I write, I'll put a link below on my website. You can download most of them for free. I have Conversations with Your Best Friend, Walking Barefoot with Your Best Friend, Cooking with Your Best Friend, and you can see them on the website and you can check them out. But I just like writing because, to me, writing is a release. So the thing is, most people write a book and they say, this is my beliefs. And maybe they get a book deal and they're like, okay, we want to capture your beliefs and your ideas and your way, because everyone has their way. There's all these self-help books and all these different things coming out now. People have their way and their story and they want to share it. But what happens is they become often so attached to the story, and they want to get it right, and they want to translate it in a way where people are going to, read it and just totally feel inspired. And the truth is, the minute you write something, the minute it comes out of your mouth or in your hands, people are going to interpret it however they're going to interpret it. So rather than trying to get it right, just do your best to shed. Writing, to me, is a process of actually shedding my beliefs. I'm not trying to hold on and say, this is what I believe and this is forever that, because I'm always changing, I'm always evolving, I'm growing. Whatever I know right now is my experience, and I'm open to it changing. If I just feel so rigid and stuck in this is what I believe, then when I go to share it, I'm going to be worried that if I don't get it right, or if then I change, that there's this whole issue. So to me, writing has become a shedding process. It's like going to the bathroom. It's like giving yourself an enema. And one thing that's really helped shift things for me is that, that writing actually isn't hard. There's things you learn actually how to type and how to write, and those skills come in time as you work. But the hard part is not writing. The hard part is living, right? So think about this. Your process of living your life, whatever book you want to share, whether it's a story based on your life or just something totally fictional made up, Your life has created all these scenarios and all these ideas, and that's where all the work comes. The easy part I found is just the letting it go. So when I just wrote this barefoot book, I challenged myself to write it as fast as possible. And I've been able to write a lot of books in a short span of time, but this is the first time, literally from starting to write to publish, it was 5 days, and I just sat there and just let this story out. And I was able to do that because I spent, years getting to a place where I had all these experiences, all this information, all this knowledge. I did all the research, I practiced, I trained, everything I needed to do to be able to share all this stuff barefoot. And then I let it out. I'm still learning things, and I've decided to actually add chapters. Maybe I'll add another book, a part two or whatever. But I just shed. So if you're writing something, if you have a story, shed. And there's a trick to actually being able to shed, which this is another piece. So it's very common when people write that they write a sentence and they reread the sentence. Does that sound good? And they write the next sentence. Whatever you can do to avoid that, please do that. So what I say is, rather than looking back, just get everything out first. Never look back at anything you wrote, unless there's like a really specific reason, like you have a character and you got to remember their name. The best thing actually to do if you're doing something more fictional, and I've done both fiction and nonfiction, is keep a list. So as you add a character, right? So let's say, character John Doe, write that character separate on a note, and just write a little bit of details about them as it's going, if you need to. The problem is, if you're trying to write a book and you keep looking back at what you were writing before, you're going to start judging yourself. And to be in a state of creative flow, we need to take out the judgment. Now, the judgment can be good to help us get to a state of creative flow, but you need to be aware that there's this judger that's saying that's not good enough, you should change that, this is all these stories. So if we can go from this state of judging to just being in the creativity first, you can channel your whole book and get it out. Once the book comes out, then yes, you can go back and rewrite and start editing and moving things around. But the first thing is just to get the first draft out without ever looking back. Like I said, the minute you start looking back, your creative flow goes from flow to stunted. You start judging yourself and you lose creativity. So the goal here is to stay in that creative flow, and it takes time. I'm not going to say it's going to be perfect right away, but I promise you that if you stop looking and judging yourself, you'll be able to get out all the things that you want to get out. And this has been monumental for me. The last 6 books that I've written have all been just like, and when I get, and everyone's different, but when I get like into a book, it's like tunnel vision, and most of the other things that I'm doing just kind of start to fade away, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night and just have stuff to write, or I'll be in the middle of like meditation, like ideas will come out. And I love that state, and I just keep going until it's done. And once it's done, depending on the book, sometimes like in this barefoot book, it was done, I reread it, and then sent it to an editor, and then did a final pass, and it was done. So that's usually the process. But for some books, I'll write the whole book and then walk away. And the last book, I think, was maybe 60,000 words. I usually write between 50 and 100,000 words per book. So a lot of people say 2,500 words a day. I usually write more like 10 to 15,000, but that's just my own experience. Do whatever feels good to you. The length really is irrelevant. Just get your story out. But what I typically will do when I write a book and I kind of like let the whole thing out, I'll step away for a while and just kind of like, okay, it's out. It's like, just the dump came out or whatever, and it's just out, and then I forget about it for a bit. And then when I start to notice that there's signs in my life or some inspiration's coming back, I'll pull the book up, and usually that's when I start doing the editing process. So my editing process looks like rereading the book, and that second time around is when I do the biggest amounts of edits, because I have the first thing just shoots out, and then I start editing, I start tweaking, I start fixing, start making just these little microscopic changes to some things, and then also much bigger changes to other things. Sometimes I might take out a whole paragraph, I might rewrite something, because when I was writing it, I might just be in this moment, and then I'm like, okay, that was a great idea, and I want to make the sentence flow differently. So I do my biggest changes, although sometimes if you nail a sentence, I just keep going. So I'm doing changes, I might be moving things around. That's when I start often doing the chapter titles. I usually know what my chapters are the first round, but I don't always have the name, so I might leave like some kind of marker, and then once I start going back, I'm like, okay, that's a cool chapter title. Once I get that second pass, typically I send it off to an editor. I have a friend that edits my books that just has, over the years, has just come to understand my style. I don't like to do big edits. I'm not looking for all kinds of crazy things. I just want them to look over grammar, spelling, and if there's some sentence structures that can maybe help from flow, I do that. And then once they send me that back, then I do my final pass. And I will still make changes because I'll read what they did. I usually just accept all their edits, honestly. I trust my friend at this point. So I just accept the edits, and then I do another read. And if I need to make changes or I want to add stuff at that point, sometimes I'll find that there's like more details that I want to add in, and then I'll reread to make sure the details are done, and then the book's done. Now, artwork, that's a whole different thing. There's different ways to publish your book. So I guess I'll talk a bit about that. So I have used Amazon in the past to publish. There's a lot of things to be said about Amazon. One of the benefits to Amazon is they make it really easy to print copies. You can print as many or as little as you want. Of course, a lot of people have Amazon accounts, so it's easy to buy the books. But I do a lot of ebooks. I like having physical copies. I prefer that personally, but I also like giving away my books. So what I usually do is I just make a PDF version of that book with the artwork on the front page, and I just send that off as a free download to people. That's the easiest way to get a book out. People have Kindles now. You can upload that right into a Kindle, or read it on your phone or your computer. So that makes it simple. I don't personally publish my books. I'm not saying I'm not saying, oh, I don't need the publishers, or who knows if a publisher even published my book, and that's kind of the point. I worked with some publishers in the past. When Mike and I used to do our cooking show, there was a lot of people reaching out that wanted to publish a book of ours. You guys would be great for this and that, and the more I got into that world, the more I realized that even though there's value in publishing a book, obviously publishers have the ability to help get your book edited, cover work, ideas. They have a whole team. They can help market it. They can sell it. They can get it in all these places. That's great and all. If your goal is to sell lots of books and become a well-known author and go on a book tour and all that stuff, that's just not my personal goal. I just personally love writing and sharing stories. And what I find with publishers is, because it is very finance, most publishers, there's some out there that are maybe more mom and pop, but mostly publishers are looking for a certain amount of money. So what they'll do is they'll say, here's an advance. They might say, here's $5,000, here's 10, depending on your clout, you'll get some advance, and you'll have that money to live on to write your book, which is super cool. And then they can help with graphics, or they might give you money to hire someone, or whatever it might be. But then you basically owe that publisher money, so all your book sales are going directly to them until you make that back, and then you get a percentage per book sale. Now, for my personal issue with that is that publishers often, because they're trying to make money, understandably, as a business, they might start tweaking your book in ways that's more accessible. So usually what publishers want to do is they want to do research. They want to say, what's your book about? What other books are out there that are similar? What's the competition? How much money? How many books have they sold? What are their rankings? On all these things. And I've just found that all I really care about is getting the information out to people very simply and very this is from my heart directly to you. It's the same reason I like making YouTube videos. I don't have to go through a corporation and change who I am and how I look and all these stuff. This is just I'm just turn the camera on and start speaking. And I try to keep my books as clear as that. It's just I'm just writing. I'm not using all kinds of big words and looking up everything in a dictionary and trying to make it sound all fancy. I'm just sharing exactly how I would speak directly to you, as simple as possible. So again, any of the books that you want to check out that I've written, you can look below, but they are written in that fashion. And what I've been surprised by, as someone growing up that literally had zero confidence in writing, is how much positive feedback I've gotten from people. Whether it's my dad or friends that are I really love your writing style, it's really easy to read. And that's my goal. I want to inspire someone out there to just open up their mind, whether it's in cooking. Cooking with your best friend is all about just my cooking journey and how much food has changed my life. And then the whole thing, the walking barefoot with your best friend, is all about feet and love of feet. And then the conversation with your best friend is really just having conversations and having these open dialogue going on. So if you're someone who's interested in writing a book, whether you want to read my book as just some sense of inspiration or to kind of see what I did, I love what happens when we grow. So another piece that I want to talk about is that a lot of people are scared to release their first video or their first song or their whatever. And one of the biggest and best pieces of advice that I've ever gotten or given is, no one's going to see, if you put out a YouTube video, let's say you want to make a YouTube video or even a book, if it's not that good, maybe 10, 15 people might see it, and maybe you'll go viral, who knows, and that's a whole different thing. But for the most part, if you put out something that's not great, few people are going to see it. But what happens is you just put something out, and that might motivate you to try something better. And maybe that thing you put out is good, and maybe people start responding well, and you're like, whoa, that's pretty cool. But you can keep getting better as you go. If you think that there's some level of perfection, there's some idea of, I need to get this song perfect and then put it out, what's going to happen is you're never going to probably put anything out, because there is no perfect. Perfect is subjective. There's no place in life where suddenly we just have it all figured out and we can just share it and people, whoa, this is the best thing ever. No, what happens is you start releasing things, even bands that you hear. They might put out their first album, it might be amazing, but they've probably been working on songs and sharing them in a much smaller circle than you even realize. Even like when Dave Matthews, he came out, he probably wrote a lot of stuff first, and when he got to a place, I use Dave Matthews because his early stuff is actually amazing, but there was probably a lot of stuff that he created before he shared it with the world that wasn't as good. And it's like he was probably playing at bars and sharing with friends and whatever. So you have this small circle of people that might be interested in what you're doing, and it doesn't have to be perfect. So put something out, and then in the putting out, you're like, oh, I could do this better because I learned something. I learned this. I got feedback, whatever it is. And most people aren't gonna like hate on stuff, when you don't even have an audience. Maybe it's your family or your friends, and they're gonna probably be positive, or maybe they have critiques. But it's in the releasing that you actually get to let that go. It's like the Beatles used to do that. They were just putting out music because they were like, we wrote a song, we want to get it out so that we can keep creating more and more and sharing more. And then they kept evolving and evolving over time. So if you have a book you want to share, just write it. Whether you actually publish it, it's just literally a lesson. Sometimes just writing books, even if you never put them out, the first book could just be like a great way to learn how to write a book. And then you did it, and then you learned things inevitably, and then you're going to get better and better and better and grow over time. So I'm not here to say there's any kind of sense of perfection, and there's way better writers than I am, and I'm not trying to be some perfect, amazing writer, but what's important to me is authenticity. So if I do something authentically, if I'm able to share completely from my heart what's authentic to me and translate it the best that I can, then whenever someone's reading it, they're going to do whatever they're going to do with that. But I don't say if I write this book and people like it, then they're going to like me. I'm not coming from this place of I have this, this ego that needs to be fed, and I need people to love me, and I need people to like praise what I'm doing. Because when I come from that state, well, yeah, exactly what do you think is going to happen? It's going to become this whole really weird thing where I'm trying to get love because I'm creating something, and then I'm going to be scared to release it. So rather just speak from your heart and share, and trust that that will lead the way, and you will grow over time, and you will learn, and you'll be able to share your story. I hope this helped. Check out my books below if you would like, and yeah, take care. Be well.